The crowds filled every street of Varuna Prime. Millions of alien beings stood shoulder to shoulder, their various forms creating a sea of colors and shapes that stretched as far as the eye could see. Above them, massive holographic displays floated in the air, each one showing the same scene from different angles. Today was the day the Galactic Empire would remind everyone who held the power. 3 humans walked in chains through the center of the capital. Their hands were bound with energy restraints that glowed blue in the sunlight. Each step they took was broadcast across 847 star systems. Every species in the Empire watched. The message was clear and simple: do not disobey. General Taemin Park walked first. He was 52 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served humanity for 30 years. Behind him came General Hanul Choi, younger at 45 with a scar across her left cheek from a battle 5 years ago. Last walked General Bora Kim, the oldest at 60, her hair completely white but her back straight and proud. They wore their military uniforms, but all insignia had been stripped away. The Empire wanted everyone to see them as criminals, not soldiers. But the 3 generals did not hang their heads. They did not cry or beg. They walked like they were heading to a ceremony, not an execution. Captain Jiwoo Lee watched from Earth, her face pressed close to the screen in the military command center. Her hands shook. She had served under General Park for 7 years. He had been more than a commander to her. He had been a mentor and a friend. Now she watched him walk to his death, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "This is wrong," she whispered. Around her, other officers stood in silence. Some had tears in their eyes. Others clenched their fists so hard their knuckles turned white. Commander Sung Ho Kang stood at the back of the room, his face like stone. He was 48 years old and had commanded the Human Defense Fleet for 10 years. He had fought in 12 major battles. He had lost friends and soldiers, but watching this execution felt worse than any battle he had ever seen. His jaw muscles tightened, but he forced himself to watch. He owed the generals that much. Across the city in the diplomatic quarter, Ambassador Hee Jin-yoon sat in her office. She wore her official robes, her face carefully neutral. She had spent the last week trying to stop this execution. She had spoken to imperial officials, sent messages to the High Council, and called in every favor she had earned in 15 years of service. Nothing had worked. The Empire had made its decision. On the screen before her, she watched the 3 generals approach the execution platform. The platform was made of white stone and stood 10 meters high. Energy blade emitters rose from the floor, waiting. The crowd noise grew louder. Supreme Commander Velcros appeared on the platform. He was a crystalline being, his body made of what looked like living diamond. Light refracted through him, creating rainbow patterns on the stone floor. He was 3 meters tall and had ruled the Imperial military for 200 years. His voice when he spoke came from speakers embedded in the platform. These 3 humans defied direct orders from the Empire, Velcro said. His words were translated instantly into every language in the Empire. During the Outer Rim campaign, they were commanded to assault the enemy position with all available forces. They refused. This is treason. This is the punishment for treason. Captain Jiwoo Lee wanted to scream at the screen. She knew what had really happened. The Empire had ordered the 3 generals to send 40,000 human soldiers in a direct frontal assault against a heavily fortified position. It would have been a massacre. Instead, the generals had used different tactics. They had split their forces, attacked from 3 sides, and used terrain to their advantage. They had won the battle with only 200 casualties. The Empire called this victory a failure because the generals had not followed the exact orders given. The Empire's military doctrine had not changed in 800 years. Every battle was fought the same way, with overwhelming force and direct assault. It worked because the Empire had more ships and soldiers than anyone else. But it wasted lives. The humans had only been part of the Empire for 20 years. Before that, humanity had fought itself for thousands of years. Humans knew many ways to fight. They knew how to win when they were outnumbered. They knew how to use strategy instead of just strength. But the Empire did not care about human ways of fighting. The Empire wanted obedience. General Park, General Choi, and General Kim climbed the steps to the platform. They stood in a line before Supreme Commander Velcros. The energy blade emitters rose higher, positioning themselves above each general's neck. "Do you have any final words?" Velcros asked. His crystalline face showed no emotion. General Park stepped forward slightly. He looked directly into the nearest camera drone. His voice was steady and clear. "We serve humanity," he said. "We always have. We always will." General Choi spoke next. "We do not regret our choices. We saved 40,000 lives." General Bo-Ra Kim smiled. It was a small smile, almost peaceful. "The Empire thinks it has won today. Let them think that." Captain Ji-Woo Lee frowned at the screen. Something in General Kim's tone felt strange. It almost sounded like confidence? No, that couldn't be right. These three were about to die. The energy blades activated. They hummed with power, glowing bright white. The crowd on Varuna Prime fell silent. Across the Empire, billions watched. This was meant to be a lesson. This was meant to make humans afraid. Supreme Commander Velcross raised one crystalline arm. "For defying the Empire, for breaking military law, for choosing your own way instead of our way, you are sentenced to death. May others learn from your mistake." The energy blades fell. It happened fast. 3 bright flashes of light. 3 bodies falling. The crowd on Varuna Prime erupted in noise. Some species cheered, supporting the Empire's justice. Others remained silent, disturbed by what they had witnessed. On Earth, several officers in the command center looked away. Others closed their eyes. Commander Sung Ho Kang forced himself to keep watching until the broadcast ended. Then he turned and walked out of the room without a word. Captain Ji-Woo Lee felt numb. She stared at the now empty screen, her mind struggling to accept what she had just seen. 3 of humanity's best military minds executed like common criminals. Gone forever. Her personal terminal beeped. A message notification. She almost ignored it. What could matter now? But something made her look. The message was encrypted with military-grade security. The sender was listed as General Taemin Park. Her heart jumped. That was impossible. She had just watched him die. This message must have been sent before, but why would he send her an encrypted message right before his execution? Her hands shook as she opened the message. The encryption took 30 seconds to decode. When it finally opened, she saw only 3 words on the screen. The trap springs. Ji-Woo Lee stared at those words for a long time. The trap springs? What trap? What did that mean? She looked around the command center. Most of the other officers had left or were leaving. No one paid attention to her. She read the message again. The trap springs, and then slowly understanding began to dawn. Her eyes went wide. Her breath caught in her throat. No. They couldn't have. Could they? She looked at the date stamp on the message. It had been written 3 days ago, before the generals had even arrived at Varuna Prime, before the trial, before the execution. They had known this was going to happen. With shaking hands, Captain Ji-Woo Lee stood up. She walked quickly to a secure terminal in the corner of the command center. She entered her access codes and pulled up classified files. Files that General Park had sent her over the past 6 months. Files she had been told to keep safe but not read until she received a specific signal. The trap springs. That was the signal. She opened the first file. Her eyes scanned the contents. Then the second file. Then the third. With each file, her expression changed from confusion to shock to something else entirely. Something that might have been hope, or might have been fear, or might have been both. The 3 generals had not been executed because they were traitors. They had been executed because they wanted to be. Because it was part of a plan that had been in motion for 6 months, a plan that was about to change everything. 72 hours after the execution, the Galactic Empire made its next demand. The message arrived at Earth's governmental headquarters in Geneva at exactly noon. Ambassador Hee Jin-yoon read it 3 times, hoping she had misunderstood. She had not. The Empire wanted 2 million more human soldiers. They wanted them assembled and ready for transport within 30 days. They would be assigned to the next Imperial campaign, serving under alien commanders following Imperial doctrine. Hye-jin sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. 2 million soldiers. Humanity's entire standing military was only 5 million strong. The Empire was asking for almost half of Earth's defense force, and this demand came just days after executing 3 generals. The message was obvious. Obey completely or face consequences. Her office door opened. Commander Sung Ho Kang entered without knocking, his face dark with anger. He dropped a datapad on her desk. "They're not just asking for soldiers," he said. "Look at Order Section 7. Hee-jin picked up the datapad and read. Her stomach sank. The Empire also wanted 60% of humanity's defensive fleet. Not to borrow, to transfer permanently to Imperial control. Earth would be left with barely enough ships to patrol its own solar system. "They're disarming us," she said quietly. "Yes." Sung-ho sat down across from her without being invited. They had known each other for 20 years. Formality seemed pointless now. If we give them what they want, we'll be completely vulnerable. If we refuse, he didn't need to finish. They both knew what happened to species who refused the Empire. Across Earth and throughout the 12 human colony systems, protests began within hours. People filled the streets of major cities. They held signs showing the faces of the 3 executed generals. They chanted slogans demanding independence. Some protests turned violent. The Empire's response was swift. Imperial warships appeared in orbit above 3 human colony worlds. Not attacking, just hovering there, watching, reminding everyone who had the power. Captain Jiwoo Lee had not slept in 3 days. She sat in a secure underground facility beneath Seoul, surrounded by 6 other officers. All of them had received messages from the dead generals. All of them had opened their sealed files. All of them now knew the truth. "We need to start immediately," said Colonel Min Seo-an. She was 39 years old, small and thin, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She commanded humanity's Special Operations Forces. "The timing is critical. If we wait too long, the Empire will scatter our forces across the galaxy. We'll never get this opportunity again." "But the risk," said another officer. "If we fail, the Empire will destroy Earth, all of it. Every human world." "They might do that anyway," Jiwoo said. She had read all the files now. She understood the plan. It was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. The generals believed the Empire would never truly accept us. "We're too different. We think differently, fight differently. Eventually, they would eliminate us as a threat." The only question was whether we'd be ready when that time came. Admiral Jae-hyun Song leaned forward. He was 51 years old with gray hair and a reputation for tactical brilliance. He had taught strategy at the Naval Academy for 15 years before taking fleet command. "The pieces are all in place. Have been for months. Our people are positioned. The hidden shipyards are operational. The weapon systems are ready. We just need to give the order." "And who gives that order?" someone asked. "The generals are dead. The civilian government doesn't even know about this plan." They all looked at Commander Sung-ho Kang. He had entered the facility 10 minutes earlier, summoned by a message he too had received. He sat at the head of the table silent, processing everything he had just learned. Finally, he spoke. "Tell me about the shipyards." Admiral Song pulled up a holographic display. It showed 12 locations scattered throughout human space. Not near any planets or stations, hidden in asteroid fields, deep in gas giant atmospheres behind dwarf stars. "We've been building ships for 3 years, Song explained. "The Empire thinks we have 43 military vessels. The actual number is 340. Sung-ho's eyes widened. "How?" "The Empire monitors all our industrial capacity. We learned to hide it," said Dr. Yeonwoo Nam, the only civilian in the room. She was a quantum physicist, 63 years old and the smartest person Sung-ho had ever met. "The Empire's sensors look for specific energy signatures. We developed methods to mask those signatures. To them, our shipyards look like civilian mining operations or research stations." 300 ships, Sung-ho said slowly, "against 50,000 Imperial vessels. Against a predictable enemy," Colonel An corrected. "The Empire has not lost a major battle in 800 years. They fight the same way every time. Direct assault, overwhelming force, standard fleet formations. We've studied every battle they've fought for the past century. We know exactly what they'll do in any situation." Lieutenant Soo-jin Han, the youngest person in the room at 28, added her piece. "I've spent 2 years mapping Imperial communication networks. I can disrupt their command and control systems when the time comes. Not permanently, but long enough to create confusion." Sung-ho looked at each face around the table. These people had been planning a war in secret. A war against the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and the 3 executed generals had been the architects of this plan. "Why didn't they tell me?" he asked quietly. "I would have helped." "They couldn't risk it," Jiwoo said. "The fewer people who knew the full plan, the safer it was. If the Empire had discovered what we were preparing, they would have struck immediately." The generals needed the Empire to feel confident, to think humans were weak and obedient. That's why they allowed themselves to be executed. They became martyrs to sell the illusion. 6 months earlier, on a dark night in Geneva, 3 generals had met in a room much like this one. General Taemin Park had stood before a holographic star map, pointing out Imperial fleet positions. "They're too comfortable," he had said. 800 years of dominance has made them lazy. They don't adapt because they've never needed to. Every species they've conquered has fought them the same way, by building bigger fleets and hoping to match their strength. "It never works," General Hanul Choi had added, "but humans are different. We spent thousands of years fighting each other. We developed hundreds of different tactics. We learned to win when outnumbered. The Empire doesn't understand this about us yet." General Bo-Ra Kim had been the one to suggest the execution idea. "The Empire needs to see us as defeated, broken. They need to believe we'll never resist. That means we need a sacrifice, something dramatic that makes them certain of their control." "You're talking about volunteering to be executed," Admiral Song had said, horrified. "Yes." Kim's voice had been calm. "3 of us, publicly, for the whole galaxy to see. The Empire will feel powerful. They'll push harder, make more demands, and when they do, they'll position their forces exactly where we need them." Dr. Nam had worked the calculations. "If we execute the plan immediately after the execution, we'll have 72 hours before the Empire can fully respond. They'll be spread out trying to intimidate our colonies. We can hit multiple targets simultaneously." "And what about the political situation?" General Park had asked. Ambassador Hyejin Yoon, present at that meeting, had answered. "The Empire is not as unified as it appears. Several member species are unhappy with Imperial control. They stay quiet because they fear the military. But if someone proved the Empire could be hurt, could be beaten, some might break away." "That's a lot of assumptions," Colonel An had said. "Yes," General Park had agreed. "But what choice do we have? The Empire will never accept us as equals. They see humans as tools, useful soldiers to throw at problems. Eventually they'll decide we're more trouble than we're worth. Better to act now on our terms than wait for them to eliminate us." Back in the present, Commander Sung Ho Kang made his decision. He stood up from the table and looked at each officer. "Begin activation," he said. "Contact all our people in Imperial space. Wake up the sleeper cells. Power up the hidden shipyards. Prepare the fleet for combat operations." "Are you certain?" Jiwoo asked. "The generals died for this plan," Sung Ho said. "They believed it was our only chance. Who am I to waste their sacrifice?" He paused. "Besides, the Empire has already made their next move. Those warships over our colonies, that demand for our soldiers and ships, they're not going to stop. This ends only one way. Around the Empire on dozens of Imperial worlds, humans who had lived quiet lives as translators, dock workers, maintenance technicians, and trade representatives received encrypted messages. The messages contained one simple instruction: activate. These men and women had been planted years ago. They had learned alien languages, studied Imperial systems, earned trust. They had waited patiently for a signal that might never come. Now it had. On the Imperial capital of Varuna Prime, a human technician named Dong Hyun worked in the Planetary Shield Control Center. He had held this job for 4 years. Everyone liked him. He was quiet, efficient, never caused problems. No one knew he had been trained by Colonel An herself. No one suspected that he carried dormant nanomachines in his bloodstream, waiting to be activated. The message came through his implant. 3 words: the trap springs. Supreme Commander Velcro stood in the Imperial High Council chamber, his crystalline body reflecting the light from a dozen suns visible through the transparent dome above. He faced the 12 council members, each representing one of the Empire's elder species. They sat in a circle around him, elevated on platforms that emphasized their authority. Councillor Thek spoke first. The insectoid being clicked its mandibles together, a sign of concern in its species. "Supreme Commander, some of us question the wisdom of executing the human generals." They were skilled officers. Their methods, while unusual, were effective. Velcros turned to face the councillor. His voice, generated by implants since crystalline beings had no vocal cords, was flat and emotionless. They disobeyed direct orders. Such behavior cannot be tolerated. The Empire's strength comes from unity of purpose and uniformity of action. Councillor Morvan, whose aquatic species required a water-filled chamber to survive, spoke through translation devices. But what if the humans retaliate? They are a proud species. Killing their leaders publicly might provoke a response. With what? Velcross gestured at a holographic display showing Imperial and human fleet positions. Humans possess 43 military vessels. The Empire commands 50,000. They have 12 colony worlds. We control 847 systems. There is no possibility of meaningful resistance. Another counselor, an energy being named Prax, pulsed with different colors as it spoke. Still, caution seems wise. The humans are unpredictable. That is precisely why discipline was necessary, Velcro said. The humans think differently than other species. They do not follow established military doctrine. They improvise and adapt. Such thinking is dangerous. It introduces chaos into order. The execution was necessary to remind them that in the Empire there is only one way to fight, our way. The council members exchanged glances. Several seemed uncertain, but none argued further. Velcros had commanded the Imperial military for 2 centuries. He had conquered 30 species. He had never lost a battle. His judgment had always been correct before. The humans will comply with our new demands, Velcro said with certainty. They have no choice. Within 30 days we will have 2 million additional human soldiers and 60% of their fleet. Humanity will be fully integrated into the Empire. Their rebellious tendencies will be crushed through proper discipline. What Velcros did not mention, because he did not know, was that at that very moment, 300 Imperial warships were moving into position around human colonies. He did not know that 500 more were being repositioned throughout human space. He did not know that this dispersal of forces was exactly what the humans had predicted. He did not know that the humans had been studying Imperial tactical doctrine for 20 years, learning every pattern, every standard response. The Empire had been powerful for so long that they had forgotten how to recognize a trap. On Earth, in the command center beneath Seoul, Admiral Jae-hyun Song watched the tracking displays with satisfaction. The Imperial ships were moving exactly where the war games had predicted they would move. The Empire was following their own doctrine perfectly. They're splitting their forces to intimidate multiple targets simultaneously, he said to the other officers around the table. Standard Imperial procedure for dealing with potential rebellion. They think the sight of warships will make us afraid. How long until all Imperial forces are in position? Commander Sung-ho Kang asked. 18 hours, Song replied. At that point, their fleet will be maximally dispersed. That's when we strike. Sung-ho nodded and turned to Colonel Min Seo-an. What's the status of our people in Imperial space? All assets are active and standing by, An reported. We have operatives in position on 15 Imperial worlds, including the capital. They're ready to execute their missions on your command. Lieutenant Su Jin Han looked up from her console. I've finished mapping the Imperial communication network. I can inject false data into their tactical systems whenever you're ready. It'll take them at least 2 hours to realize they're getting bad information, and another hour to purge the corruption. 3 hours of confusion, Sung-ho said thoughtfully. That's not much time. It's enough, Admiral Song said confidently. The Empire relies heavily on centralized command and control. Take that away, and their individual ship commanders won't know what to do. They're trained to wait for orders, not to think independently. Dr. Yan Wu-nam stood near a holographic display showing the hidden shipyards. All 340 ships are ready. Crews are aboard. Weapons are charged. We can launch whenever you give the word. Captain Ji-woo Lee felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. This was really happening. They were going to war with the Galactic Empire. 300 ships against 50,000. It sounded like suicide. But she remembered General Park's words recorded in one of his files. Numbers aren't everything. The Empire has forgotten that. We'll remind them. Sung-ho looked at the faces around him. These people had worked in secret for years, preparing for a battle that might end with humanity's destruction. They had believed in the 3 generals' plan enough to risk everything. We proceed, he said. All forces begin final preparations. Execute the plan in 18 hours. Around the table, officers saluted and rushed to their tasks. The trap was about to spring. On the Imperial capital world of Varuna Prime, Dong-hyun finished his evening meal in the crew cafeteria. He had worked his shift at the Planetary Shield Control Center. Tomorrow he would return. Tomorrow would be different. He walked back to his small apartment in the human worker quarter. Other humans lived here. people who had come to the capital for various jobs. Most were genuine workers, unaware of what was coming. A few, like Dong-hyun, were something else. In his apartment, Dong-hyun activated a hidden compartment in his wall. Inside was a small device no bigger than his thumb. It contained a program that would spread through the shield control center systems when activated. The program was designed by Dr. Nam herself. It would cause the planetary shields to fail at a precise moment. Other operatives across Varuna Prime had similar devices. Some would target communication relays. Others would sabotage the Imperial Fleet Command Center. A few would simply cause chaos and confusion at critical moments. Dong-hyun checked the device, then hid it away. 18 hours. He lay down on his bed but knew he wouldn't sleep. How could anyone sleep before such a day? Meanwhile, in deep space, the hidden shipyards came fully online. These facilities had been built slowly over 3 years, disguised as asteroid mining operations or civilian research stations. The Empire's sensors had scanned them dozens of times and found nothing suspicious. The humans had learned to hide in plain sight. The ships themselves were smaller than standard Imperial warships. Humans couldn't match the Empire's industrial capacity, so they had built differently. Their ships were faster, more maneuverable, and used less crew. Many systems were automated using advanced AI that the Empire considered too dangerous to use. The Empire believed AI could not be trusted in combat. Humans had no such concerns. Captain Kyung-soo commanded one of these ships, the UHSF Defiance. He stood on the bridge watching his crew complete final preparations. Most of his crew were young, in their 20s and 30s. They had trained for this in secret, never knowing if they would actually fight. Now the moment had arrived. "All systems are green, Captain," his executive officer reported. "Weapons charged, engines ready, stealth systems operational." "Good," Kyung-soo said. He pulled up a display showing the position of the 43 visible human ships. Those vessels were slowly moving toward Imperial space, obeying the order to surrender. But they were crewed by AI, not humans. They were decoys, and when the time came, weapons. The real human fleet waited in the darkness, invisible and unexpected. On Earth, Ambassador Hye Jin-yoon sat in her office, thinking about what was to come. She had not been asked to participate in the military planning. Her job was political. When the battle started, she would need to speak to the galaxy. She would need to explain why humans had chosen war. She would need to convince other species that the Empire could be resisted. She had spent the past 3 days writing a speech. She had rewritten it 17 times. How did you explain something like this? How did you make the galaxy understand? She looked at the photo on her desk. It showed her with the 3 executed generals, taken at a diplomatic reception 2 years ago. They were all smiling. They had known, even then, they might not survive to see the plan succeed. They had done it anyway. Hye-jin picked up her datapad and read her speech one more time. It would have to be good enough. In 18 hours, nothing would ever be the same. Admiral Song stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet positions, supply lines, and tactical projections. He had spent 30 years studying warfare. He had taught strategy to 3 generations of human officers. Everything he knew would be tested in the next few days. The Empire's greatest weakness is their predictability, he said to his staff officers. They have standard responses to every situation. When they see a threat, they respond with overwhelming force and direct assault. They don't adapt because they've never needed to. We're going to exploit that. Commander Sung-ho Kang stood in the command center, watching the countdown timer. 18 hours had passed. All preparations were complete. In 60 seconds, everything would change. He activated the communication system that connected him to every human military unit across known space. "This is Commander Kang to all forces," he said, his voice steady and clear. "In 30 seconds, we begin. Fight well. Fight smart. Remember what we're protecting. Remember why the 3 generals gave their lives. For Park, Choi, and Kim. For humanity. The trap springs now." Across 12 star systems, thousands of humans heard those words and moved. On Varuna Prime, Dong-hyun walked into the planetary shield control center for his shift. He smiled at his coworkers, made small talk about the weather, and sat at his station. His hands moved across the controls normally for exactly 7 minutes. Then, at the precise second planned, He inserted the tiny device into a data port. The program Dr. Nam had designed spread through the system in milliseconds. Alarms did not sound. Warning indicators did not flash. The shield simply began to fail, sector by sector, invisible to the operators watching their screens. The displays showed everything functioning normally. In reality, 20% of the planet's defensive shields were already offline, and the percentage was growing. Across the city, 17 other human operatives activated their own programs. Communication relays that connected the planetary defense grid to the orbital fleet began experiencing unexplained delays. Power conduits to the Imperial Fleet Command Center developed mysterious fluctuations. Traffic control systems in the orbital dock started sending incorrect positioning data to ships. Individually, each sabotage was small. Together, they created chaos. In Imperial Fleet headquarters, a Velcross's junior officer noticed something odd on his display. "Supreme Commander, I'm detecting communication irregularities from several systems." Velcross examined the data. "Minor technical issues. Have maintenance teams investigate." "Yes, sir." The officer sent the orders. Maintenance teams across the capital began checking systems, finding problems that seemed random and unconnected. None of them realized this was an attack. 1,600 light-years away, near the border of human space, Admiral Jae-hyun Song gave his order. "All ships, launch. Execute attack pattern Delta 7. 340 human warships powered up their engines and became visible to Imperial sensors for the first time. They had been hiding in asteroid fields behind planets inside gas giant atmospheres. Now they emerged into open space and accelerated toward their targets. At the same moment, the 43 visible human ships that had been traveling toward Imperial shipyards suddenly changed course. Their AI pilots armed their self-destruct systems and pushed engines to maximum speed. They were no longer pretending to surrender. They were now weapons. An Imperial sensor operator on the planet Coraxus saw the new signatures appear on his display and froze in confusion. His scanner showed 43 human ships, which was correct. But now it also showed 340 additional ships. That couldn't be right. Humans only had 43 ships total. Everyone knew that. "Sir," he called to his supervisor, "I'm detecting massive sensor errors. The system shows over 300 unidentified vessels in human space." The supervisor looked at the display, frowned, and ran diagnostics. "The system checks out. Those readings are real. But that would mean the humans have been hiding hundreds of ships." "That's impossible. Run the scan again." By the time they confirmed the readings were accurate, it was too late. The 43 AI-piloted ships reached Imperial shipyards in 7 different systems. They broadcast friendly identification codes. Imperial traffic control saw expected human vessels arriving as ordered. Dock operators prepared to receive them. The ships entered the shipyards at normal approach speed. Then, all at once, they detonated. Nuclear explosions lit up 7 Imperial shipyards. The blast waves destroyed docking facilities, damaged orbital platforms, and caught dozens of Imperial ships that were docked for maintenance. In an instant, over 200 Imperial vessels were destroyed or crippled. On Earth, Lieutenant Sujin Han activated her program. False data flooded into the Imperial military communication network. Imperial commanders across the galaxy suddenly received reports of human attacks in dozens of locations simultaneously. Some reports were real, most were fake. But the commanders had no way to know which was which. Supreme Commander Velcross watched as his tactical display erupted in alerts. Red warning indicators appeared across the holographic map. Reports streamed in faster than he could read them. Shipyards under attack. Fleet signatures detected. Defensive systems malfunctioning. Communication delays, power failures. "What is happening?" he demanded. His officers scrambled to make sense of the chaos. "Sir, we're receiving reports of coordinated attacks. Multiple systems, human vessels appearing in unexpected numbers. The earlier sensor reading was accurate. They have hundreds of ships." "Impossible," Velcross said. "We monitored their industrial capacity. They couldn't have built that many ships without us knowing." "Nevertheless, sir, they exist. They're attacking now." Velcross forced himself to think. This was unexpected, but the solution was obvious. Recall all dispersed forces. Concentrate the fleet. We have 50,000 ships. Even if the humans somehow built 300, we outnumber them massively. We crush them with overwhelming force. He sent the orders. Across the Empire, thousands of warships began changing course, moving to consolidate into larger battle groups. It was the correct response according to Imperial military doctrine. It was exactly what the humans had predicted he would do. Admiral Song watched the Imperial forces begin their consolidation and smiled grimly. They're moving just as planned. Fleet groups Beta, Gamma, and Delta advance to intercept. Alpha Group, maintain position and prepare for hit-and-run strikes. The human fleet split into 4 groups and accelerated toward different targets. They weren't trying to face the Imperial fleet in direct battle. That would be suicide. Instead, they were targeting vulnerable positions, supply convoys, isolated patrol groups, lightly defended facilities. The human ships were smaller and faster than Imperial vessels. They struck quickly, did damage, and retreated before Imperial reinforcements could arrive. It was guerrilla warfare on an interstellar scale. Captain Kyung-soo commanded his ship, the Defiance, in an attack on an Imperial supply depot. His squadron of 12 ships emerged from stealth, launched missiles at the depot, and destroyed it in under 3 minutes. Before Imperial defense ships could respond, the human squadron activated stealth systems and disappeared into the darkness of space. "Clean kill," his executive officer reported. "No casualties on our side. The depot is destroyed." "Good," Kyung-soo said. "Set course for Rally Point Charlie. We'll regroup and wait for the next target." Across human space, similar attacks occurred simultaneously. The Empire's forces were still dispersed, trying to intimidate human colonies. Now they found themselves under attack by an enemy that appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and vanished before they could retaliate. On Varuna Prime, the effects of the human sabotage began to compound. With shields failing and communications disrupted, the planetary defense grid couldn't coordinate properly. When a human strike force of 30 ships appeared in orbit, they met far less resistance than they should have. The human ships didn't attack the planet itself. They targeted military installations, the orbital defense platforms, the Fleet Command Center, and the symbolic execution platform where the 3 generals had died. Missiles rained down with precision. The platform where Velcros had stood 3 days earlier exploded in a ball of flame. Dong-hyun watched from his apartment window as fire streaked across the sky. He felt no joy at the destruction, only grim satisfaction. The Empire had wanted to make an example of the 3 generals. Now humanity was making its own statement. Back in the Imperial Command Center, Velcro struggled to control his forces. The communication network was compromised. Reports were contradictory. He couldn't get an accurate picture of the battle. His forces were scattered, responding to threats that sometimes didn't exist while real attacks happened elsewhere. "Concentrate the fleet at Varuna Prime," he ordered. "All forces return to the capital. We'll make our stand here." It took 6 hours for the scattered Imperial ships to begin arriving at the capital. 6 hours during which human forces struck targets across the Empire. They destroyed supply depots, disabled communication relays, and ambushed isolated Imperial ships. Each victory was small. Together, they added up to something significant. By the time 5,000 Imperial ships had gathered at Varuna Prime, they had lost 300 vessels and dozens of facilities. The human fleet had lost only 27 ships. Admiral Song studied the tactical situation. The Imperial fleet was finally concentrating, which meant the hit-and-run phase was ending. Now came the dangerous part. The humans needed to prove they could stand and fight at least long enough to earn respect. "All fleet groups converge on Varuna Prime," he ordered. "We're going to give them a real battle." 300 human ships, minus the casualties, began moving toward the Imperial capital. They weren't trying to hide anymore. They wanted the Empire to see them coming. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Varuna Prime. The galaxy was different now, and everyone knew it. The war had not ended in those first days. After the initial shock, the Empire had regrouped and fought back. There had been more battles, more losses on both sides. But something fundamental had changed. The Empire's aura of invincibility was broken. For the first time in 8 centuries, they had been forced to negotiate rather than dictate. On Earth, in the plaza outside the United Government building in Geneva, a massive crowd gathered for the unveiling of a monument. Humans from across Earth and the 12 colony worlds had come. Thousands filled the plaza. Millions more watched via holographic broadcast. The monument stood 15 meters tall, made of black stone quarried from Mars. 3 figures were carved into the stone: General Taemin Park, General Hanyul Choi, and General Bora Kim. They stood with their heads held high, looking toward the sky. At the base of the monument, words were carved in every human language. They fell so the galaxy could rise. Admiral Jae Hyun Song stood at a podium before the monument, preparing to speak. He wore his full dress uniform with new insignia. After the battle, he had been promoted to Supreme Commander of all human military forces. The title felt heavy, but he carried it with pride. The crowd quieted as he began to speak. 3 months ago, we lost 3 great leaders, Song said. His voice carried across the plaza and beyond. General Park, General Choi, and General Kim were executed by the Galactic Empire. The Empire wanted to make them examples. They wanted to show the galaxy what happened to those who disobeyed. He paused, looking at the carved faces in the stone. The Empire succeeded in making them examples, but not the way they intended. These 3 generals taught us something the Empire had forgotten. They taught us that sometimes the greatest victories require the greatest sacrifices. They showed us that strength is not just about numbers or weapons. Strength is about knowing what you're fighting for and being willing to pay the price. In the crowd, Captain Jiwoo Lee stood with other officers from the secret planning group. She wore General Park's combat knife on her belt, a gift from his family after the battle. She touched it now, remembering her mentor's final message. The trap springs. Song continued his speech. The generals knew what was coming. They planned for months. They prepared every detail, and they volunteered themselves as the trigger. They walked to their execution, knowing it would start something bigger than themselves. Not just a battle for human freedom, but a message to every species in the galaxy that the Empire can be challenged. The crowd remained silent, listening intently. We won our freedom, Song said, but we paid for it. We lost over 100 ships in the fighting. 5,000 soldiers died. Thousands more were wounded. Every human world suffered some damage from the war. The cost was high. He looked across the sea of faces, but what we gained was worth that cost. We proved that humanity will not be slaves. We proved that we can stand against the most powerful empire in known space and survive. We proved that courage and intelligence can overcome superior numbers. Song gestured to the monument. These 3 generals gave their lives for that proof. We honor them today, but more importantly, we honor them every day by living as free people, by standing tall, by never forgetting the price of freedom. The crowd erupted in applause. It went on for several minutes. Some people cheered, others cried. All of them understood that they were living in a new era, one that had been bought with blood and sacrifice. After the ceremony, the military leaders gathered in a private conference room. Commander Sung Ho Kang, now holding the title of Fleet Admiral, sat at the head of the table. Around him were the people who had planned and executed the rebellion. The peace treaty is holding, Ambassador Hye Jin-yoon reported. She had spent the last 3 months in intense negotiations with imperial representatives. The Empire has officially recognized human sovereignty over our 12 colony systems. They've withdrawn their forces from our space. We're no longer required to provide soldiers for their campaigns. What about reparations? Colonel Min Seo-an asked. She had led special operations throughout the war and now commanded the newly formed Human Intelligence Service. None, Yoon admitted. The Empire won't officially apologize or pay for the damage they caused. But they have agreed to reduce tariffs on human trade and given us access to certain technologies they previously restricted. It's not everything we wanted, Sung Ho said. But it's more than any species has gotten from the Empire in living memory. Dr. Yeonwoo Nam pulled up a holographic display showing recent developments across the galaxy. 5 species have declared independence from the Empire since our victory. 3 more are in active rebellion. The Empire is losing control. That was part of the plan, Admiral Song said. The generals believed that if we could prove resistance was possible, others would follow. They were right. The Empire still has 45,000 ships, Lieutenant Su Jinhan pointed out. She had been promoted to commander, and now led the Cyber Warfare Division. They could still crush us if they committed everything. But they won't, Yoon said confidently. Because now they know the cost. We proved that fighting humans means losing ships and people, even in victory. The Empire is practical. They'll trade with us rather than fight us. That's all we ever needed. Captain Jiwoo Lee, now Admiral Lee, asked the question on everyone's mind. What happens next? Do we prepare for another war? Build more ships? The Empire might change their mind. Sung Ho leaned back in his chair. Yes, we prepare. But differently now. The generals created a new military doctrine, one based on human thinking rather than imperial thinking. We're making it official. Every officer in our military will study what we now call the Park Doctrine. What exactly is the Park Doctrine? Someone asked. Admiral Song answered. 3 principles. First, never trust in superior numbers alone. Always prepare for the stronger opponent. Second, study, adapt, survive. Learn everything about your enemy and use that knowledge. Third, be willing to pay the price. Sometimes victory requires sacrifice. The generals embodied all 3. Jiwoo said quietly. Yes, they did. The room fell silent for a moment. Remembering. In the weeks that followed, life across human space began to normalize. Ships were repaired. Damaged colonies were rebuilt. Families mourned their dead. But everywhere there was also a sense of pride and possibility that had not existed before. The 3 generals' families received full honors. Their names were given to ships, stations, and schools. Every human child learned their story. They became legends, but legends grounded in truth. 5 years later, a new species called the Kelvari made contact with Earth. They were a small species, recently conquered by the Empire and facing the same pressures humanity had faced. Their delegation arrived in Geneva, requesting an audience with Ambassador Hyejin Yoon. The Kelvari ambassador, a small being with blue skin and large eyes, sat nervously in Yoon's office. We've heard stories about your rebellion, the ambassador said through a translation device. About 3 leaders who died to defeat an empire. Are the stories true? Yoon smiled gently. She was 62 now, her hair gray, but her eyes still sharp. The stories are true. 3 of our greatest generals allowed themselves to be executed. It was part of a plan to free humanity from imperial control. How is that possible? The Kelvari asked. How does dying lead to victory? Because they understood something important, Yoon explained. The Empire's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. They were so powerful, so used to winning that they became predictable. They stopped adapting. Our generals used that against them. They created a situation where the Empire would behave exactly as expected, and then turned that behavior into a trap. The Kelvari ambassador leaned forward eagerly. Could such a plan work for us? The Empire is pressuring my people. They want us to give up our autonomy, our culture. We want to resist, but we're small. We have few ships. Numbers aren't everything, Yoon said. She pulled up a holographic display showing the Battle of Varuna Prime. We faced an enemy 17 times larger than us. We survived because we fought smart, not just hard. Because we knew our enemy better than they knew themselves. Would you help us? The ambassador asked. Would you teach us? Yoon considered the question carefully. She thought about the 3 generals, about their sacrifice, about what they had hoped to achieve. They had not fought just for humanity. They had fought to prove that resistance was possible, to give hope to others facing the same oppression. Yes, Yoon said. We'll help you. Not by fighting your war for you, but by teaching you how to fight it yourself, by sharing what we learned. Over the next months, Kelvari officers came to Earth to study at the new Strategic Academy. They learned the Park Doctrine. They studied human history, human tactics, human ways of thinking. They were not the only ones. Representatives from 7 different species came to learn. Earth, once seen as a backwater world of a primitive species, became something else. It became a beacon, a place where beings came to learn how to stand against empire, how to fight for freedom, how to survive against superior forces. In the main hall of the Strategic Academy, a large holographic display showed the 3 generals' final walk to the execution platform.